Blessings BookTube. This is Dan. Today I have an exciting discussion for you of the Arabian Nights. This is a group read that we're doing, and this is the first part of the Arabian Nights, which are in 3 volumes in the version they're reading. I'm actually reading the BURTON translation. BURTON was a Randi fellow, and he translated the Kama Sutra, among other things. And so his translation is a little saucy. And I chose that because I'm going to, for Women's Month, I'm going to discuss in this first video the women of the beginning of the Arabian Nights. All right. So the first thing to talk about is that this first part of the Arabian Nights can be divided in 2 pretty clearly, because in the first 13 chapters, the women appear in the titles of the stories in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 cases. And in almost all of them, they are referred to in this first part as ladies. And in the second part, they'll be referred to almost exclusively as wives. So the first one is The Porter and the 3 Ladies of Baghdad. This has the true weirdness of a real folktale. Real folktales don't fit the tropes that we're so used to seeing in fairy tales, the kinds of things that Prop analyzed in his literary criticism. This first one's a good example. There's a sort of a classical setup in that we have a Galahad situation. I believe it was Galahad, the Arthurian knight who was taken into the castle of the women and ruined everything, lost the grail for asking a question. So in this case, it's a porter, so a lowly person. We're going to see this theme in the first part as well. So a porter helps this lady carry things back to her home, where she's got the 2 other comrades. And it's, amazing fruits, and it's just a feast that they bought. And he's more and more charged. He's like, I wish you had told me, I would have got a donkey. But anyway, he carries all this stuff back for them. And he's so enchanted by them, and they invite him to feast with them. And they, play music and recite poetry, and just having this wonderful feast. Of course, at a certain point, the Caliph is going to show up, right, in disguise. He likes to go about the town and see what the lowly folk are up to. So he has his wazir, his advisor, Jafar, who you might recognize. Jafar tells him to, we'll pretend we're merchants. So they join the party. But at a certain point, the women bring out 2 dogs that they beat and then chained. And then there's a lady who shows up to play the lute. And she, or no, they play the lute to her and sing songs that upset her so much she rips all her clothes off. That happens 3 songs, I think 3 times. And then at a certain point, they realize she's got like scars on her back. And then, well, I won't tell you the mystery of it all, because we can't know, because this is the injunction of the house, which is over the door, where it says, basically, ask me no questions, I'll tell you no lies. I don't need to look it up, I can remember. It was, do not ask any questions because you will not like the answers. But of course, the Caliph makes the porter ask, right? And then they're going to kill the porter, and he says, don't blame me, they made me do it. Anyway, so that's the first story. So you can see it starts with a sort of uh, romantic troubadour type trope with the the women in the castle and the don't ask any questions. But then it just gets weird with the dogs and this woman ripping her clothes. All right, so our next lady story, the sweep and the noble lady. Again, we have a lowly person. The sweep, he actually sweeps up the like the abattoir, the butchery, and so he's carrying all these offal on the donkey, and the people come running because they're being chased out of the road, and they tell him to hide, but this the lady spots him. So it's this lady from the harem, and no one's supposed to see them, so they go, beating everybody out of the road as they go before him. But she's attracted. He thinks it's to the smell of the donkey, and then again we have this sort of mysterious story of the sweep's interaction with this woman from the harem who takes a liking to him, be sports with him, shall we say, in this pavilion. And this goes on and on for a while, and eventually it comes to pass that her husband is doing her wrong, and so she's getting her own back with this guy. And I won't tell you if that ends well for him or not. There's a twist, so that's another fun one. Again, a lowly man with a lady. Now the next is breaks the pattern. It's a man with 6 slave girls. This is just it's probably just a story version of more or less a poem, because it's the 6 different women, thin and a fat one, blonde and a brunette, white and a dark skinned one, and each time they have to recite verses in praise of their attributes, and then disparaging the attributes of their opposite. And so that's really, there's not too much story to that one. So, but it fits the theme of sort of woman as temptress, right? So those are lowborn ladies. But now we're back to the ladies again, because we have a queen, Queen Zubaida, in the bath with the Caliph Harun al-Rashid. So Harun al-Rashid gets up to some interesting stuff. In this one, it's basically he just spots the girl at her bath. But this one, it's a one-page thing. But I do, leading into this, telling of a different story. But I do have to recite this one for you because it's beautiful. She tries to hide herself, and she can't. Captured me 6, all bright with youthful glee. Then on the 6 be best salams for me. Nope, that's not it. Let's try this again. There's a lot of poetry all throughout this, all of these stories, quatrains, all different kinds. All right, this one's sort of done in couplets. I looked on her with loving eye, and grew anon my old repine. For the gazelle who captured me, where the 2 lotus trees incline, there was the water poured on it, from Ur of the silver mine. And seen me she had hidden it, but 'twas too plump for fingers fine. Would heaven that I were on it, an hour or better 2 hours, lying. Okay, actually that rhyme scheme was sort of woven. That was the again, we have just sort of more of a poem than a story to the beauty of this beautiful woman with the plump attraction, shall we say. All right, so we have another very strange story. This one is a lady and a bear. So again, there's like a porter, and every week he helps her collect all these riches of food and whatnot. So again, we have a feast, and finally one day he gets curious and he follows her. She brings it to this cave, and she feeds this bear. It's sort of implied that maybe she, is very friendly with the bear. And he comes in and stabs and kills the bear. And she says, if you don't kill me, I'm going to kill you because I don't want to live after you kill my bear. And so he kills her. And there's a fortune in the cave. And then he runs into the Caliph. And the Caliph tells him kind of, only you can enter this cave. And anyway, so another very strange one. Um, but it's not that one. I won't keep you in suspense. It's not super explained exactly what's going on with that lady and that bear. Then we have the goldsmith and the cashmere singing girl. So this one is about a painting. A man falls in love with a ludist that's depicted in this painting, and he goes all over around in search of her, and he eventually finds her and finds her sleeping. Does he plan a kiss, Sleeping Beauty? No, he stabs her and then frames her and gets her in the end from the Caliph with this whole bizarre, strange tale, convoluted. Next is Lady and Her Five Suitors. This one, she's trying to get her brother out of jail. Here's where we enter into pure, like, Decameron, Boccaccio stuff. She's going to, entreat progressively higher officials for to get her brother out of prison. And she gives them all appointments. And we can see what's coming because the appointments are like, you come at breakfast, and you come at lunch, and you come at dinner. Anyway, so she gets them all hiding in the same cabinet. But, none of them can speak of it because they out someone else, they out themselves. And of course, you can probably guess if she gets her brother out of prison. So yeah, the lovers locked in the cabinet is that is a very famous kind of story, well beloved from Boccaccio to Chaucer, all of that. So okay, so now we're going to enter into our second part. The second part, as I said, we have wives stories. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 11 stories. All are wives except one lady sneaks back in. And there's one wife story that was kind of just before, it's chapter 14, which is right just before chapter 16, which is kind of the pivot, I think. The reason I think that's the pivot is because in chapter 6, we have our first demoiselle, the daughter. And that sort of brackets this second part because there's another damsel in chapter 33 that ends this second section. So those two bracket it. And we're also going to get in this section a good wife and a bad wife. All right, so let me tell you what's going on with these wife stories. We're going to see the return of the cabinet probably. Yes, we have at least two more cabinet stories. One in which a robber is trapped and extorted, and another in the Koleb the droll and his wife and her 4 lovers, in which they all end up in the closet again. And I'm sure there was one where they were in separate closets, but I seem to have lost track of it. Anyway, so these are very common stories, right? When you have a wife, you have infidelities, and we have his part or her part. We have, again, also very common story. I remember at least one version of this in a story from a First Americans group. I can't remember which exactly. But it's the sort of thing where they tell the guy to, the husband comes back, right? It's going to catch him. They tell him to run because he's going to castrate them. And then she tells the guy who's got to run away that that he's going to he wants something from them, 2 of something, which of course he thinks are the testes. And so he's running after. He's like, I want them, and referring to whatever these 2 things are, geese or gold or coins or whatever the 2 things are, doesn't matter. And he thinks he's talking about the two things that he wants. So he's running for his life. So there's one of those as well. So what I want to do is, with this part, I think, is tell you about contrast the good wife and bad wife story. But before I do that, I'll just tell you very quickly about the framing stories. The first is a tale of Richard, who married this beautiful daughter to a poor old man. And the last one, it's Nur al-Din Ali and the damsel Anis al-Jalis. This is basically a Tristan and Isolde type story where the sheikh entrusts the beauty to an underling. And in the case of Tristan, right, Tristan and her and the woman he's charged to bring to the king, there's a love filter. They end up drinking for some reason, and then of course, he takes up with the woman he's supposed to be bringing to the king. In this case, it's not the wazir, the counselor, who besports with the lady he's supposed to have bought for the sheikh. It's his son who does it. And so that's basically how that story goes. So let's talk about the difference between the good wife and the bad wife, because up till now we've pretty much only have women as sources of temptation, women as wives, faithful or not. Let's see if we can get one more sort of vision of the roles that women might play in this society. And we also have the ludist, sort of the entertainer. In one way, you can see that this sort of woman as temptress thing kind of fits with a lot of people's stereotype of Arabia. But on the other hand, you can see that this explodes a lot of thoughts about like these strict fundamentalist people, right? Whereas in fact, there's all kinds of shenanigans going on. So let's talk about the good wife and the bad wife. So the good wife story is 24, chapter 24, the good wife of Cairo and her four gallants. I think we see something interesting happening here already. And then the bad wife, there's actually two. There's the whorish wife who vaunted her virtue. But we're going to talk about the actual, what is it called, wicked wife? Yeah, the fellah and his wicked wife. So first, the good wife and her four gallants. So our good wife is in Cairo. She's got her husband's out for the day, and she's going to get him great goods, ram, good meat, some silk, all this kind of stuff. And how does she procure him all of these things? Well, she uses her wiles. I think this is going to be the second case time in which men in the closet are tricked in such a way, timed so well, in such a way that they don't have to be, she doesn't have to do anything, give them anything. So I think it was the previous story, I was mistaken, I think was in separate closets. This is the one in which all of them end up in the same closet. So it's the butcher who brings the ram and the trader who brings the silk. Anyway, there's four of them, and they all bring her these great gifts, and they all end up in the closet. Not only that, she gets them for some reason, I don't know why they go along with this, she gets them to dress up in like petticoats or some sort of feminine garb. And so they're half undressed and half, dressed as, in these feminine clothes. And they're all hiding together in the same cabinet and sort of all very ashamed. And then when the husband comes home, she says, I have all these great things for you. And he's like, how did you do it? And she brings them out one by one and parades them in front of him. And of course, they all run off and none of them ever want to speak of it ever again. So this is a good wife. She uses her wile to enrich her husband. She doesn't have to give anything to the men to get stuff from them. And right, so now what makes a bad wife? That last story, by the way, contains an interesting embedded story, which is something that you will find in many of the 1001 stories, and very interesting as well, but unfortunately we didn't have time to really get into it. It's a little off our theme, but sometimes they are related to the they're always related to the stories in which they're embedded in some way, more or less closely. Um, okay, so now the wicked wife is giving basically the good white flour to her lover. She makes him, amazing breads and tarts and cakes and all kinds of goodies. And the husband, who is the fella, which means tiller, he grows corn, barley. I can't remember what grain he grows, but he's a farmer, and that's how we get the word fella. So the fella, he's like, how come I'm like this amazing farmer and I get the best wheat, and yet my bread is so is brown and gritty and no good at all. And he has luckily a wise servant, and the wise servant, um, you know, uh, basically fixes it so that she can't get away with this anymore. So she has to start giving the good bread to the her husband. So he's pretty happy now, but she's not. And so I don't know if her lover is gonna hang around with her if he doesn't get his good white bread and tarts and cakes. So she plots the death of her husband, and the servant knows this is going to go down. He basically pretends to sell her poison, and she gives one of her bangles for it, like an anklet or something. And the servant goes to the fella and says, "Do you recognize your wife's bangles? She gave me this in exchange for poison to kill you." And then I gave her, something harmless. So she puts it in the bread. She feeds this poisoned bread to her husband, and he pretends to die. And then, of course, he doesn't die, and she's caught, basically. So that is obviously quite a wicked wife, as was the one who boasted of her, vaunted her virtue, when in fact she wasn't virtuous. So yeah, obviously infidelity and alienating the goods of the family, I guess you could say. Um, so not the note I wanted to end on for Women's Month, but I think we could see that there's a range, albeit not a super empowered range, but a range of roles that women are playing in this society. Ladies, highborn, wives, regular wives. Some of these tales are very much in the courtly tradition, fit a lot of the tropes you might find in other collections of stories, um, fairy tales, etc. Some are very much of the folktale variety, a little more strange and mysterious. So all of that is to be had in the 1001 Tales if you'd like to join our reading group. I'll put in the description, because I can't remember off the top of my head, the fellows who are running it. We'll have, I anticipate having probably 2 more videos on this work, because obviously it's a huge one and fundamental to a lot of the world literature. You can see in this work some of the influences of other story collections, Panchatantra that I did a video on, and some other things. And you can also very much see its influence on future stories, and all the way through to the Enlightenment. Voltaire, right, was in love with these kinds of stories. All right, thank you for sticking with, and any questions, put them down in the comments. I'd love to say a lot more about all kinds of things in these tales, but for today I sort of just stuck to the one theme.